But notice the story doesn't end with this blessing, as beautiful as it is. This healing hand on the brow is the beginning of life in God, not the end of it. It's the beginning. Healed of her illness, Peter's mother-in-law immediately, Mark says, immediately begins to serve them. And it's not just because Jesus wants his ritual lunch. Because she's so grateful. I know there are some critics who think that this passage is one that just sort of reinforces that patriarchal thing where it's women's role in the world to serve men, but I don't think that's what's going on here. She's been lifted up, and she wants to lift up others. She wants to serve out of gratitude. This is the full cycle of the Christian life right here. The word that's translated serve in this text in the Greek is diakonai, from which we get the word deacon. And these are an order of people who are ordained to a life of service. Lawrence Wood suggests that this very passage is the beginning of the church. When, in response to the healing love of God through Jesus, Peter's mother-in-law gets up and in full gratitude, her dignity restored, she just gives back. She's been lifted up, and so she lifts up others. The Christian life doesn't stop with being lifted up. To be in Christ is to complete that cycle of blessing. We have our own deacons here, in this congregation. I think this community of faith is so wonderful because of the history of lifelong servants of God in this congregation. It's just part of the field of consciousness that we live and move and have our being in. I think, for example, I don't know if Muriel is here. I'm going to embarrass you, Muriel. Ah, too bad. Muriel Bamford, Kay Metherall, who's not able to be with us at worship anymore, but talk about deacons of the church. They both were Christian missionaries. They were nurses in Christian hospitals in India. And a friend of mine, Melinda Monroe, who used to be chair of the board here, she moved to Windsor, but she from time to time preaches in that congregation, and she told them about Kay Metherall, this deacon, who knew what it was to be lifted up, and she knew what it was to lift up. Here's Melinda. When I asked Kay how long she had been in India, I expected something like 6 months or a year. She replied, pretty steady on from 1948 to 1986. What? Melinda writes, she'd served as a missionary nurse for nearly 40 years through independence, partition, nuclear buildup. Holy moly! And she told me a story about her service, Melinda writes. It was customary for the people who had leprosy to beg in front of the religious institutions on their days of worship, mosques on Friday, churches on Sunday. The minister's wife always had rupees to give the families after church, and she collected the money every week from the staff at the mission. Kay, however, realized that what the people in front of the church really wanted was for others to touch them. They had a form of leprosy that was blood-borne, so it could not be contracted by physical contact, much like AIDS and hepatitis C here. Kay, being a nurse, knew that, and so did her colleagues, but unlike her colleagues, her gift to these people every Sunday was to shake their hands, to remember their names, and to hold their children, to lift them up. Kay completed the cycle of blessing, lifting up, literally, these leprous children and the spirits, the parents of these children. And Muriel, if she was here, could tell you similar stories about what it means to be lifted up and then to lift up in grateful response. But many could. Joanne Hausch, who's the ministry team leader of Street Meals here, can tell you what it's like to be lifted up and then lift up youth at risk on the streets of Vancouver. And this team not only feeds them lunches, but Canadian Memorial, I think now through this ministry team, has provided over 10 scholarships so that these kids can go on and further their education so that they can be lifted up and join the rest of society. That's what it is to be in Christ. Last year, this congregation gave $13,000, friends, to First United, and at least 12 meals of stew, vegetables, chocolate cake, and ice cream, along with a whole lot of love. Out of the cold, Anita Innes can tell you, can show you what it feels like to lay your hand on the brow of over 1,000 homeless men and women every year, because sometimes, like all of us, it's necessary to reteach a thing, a flower, a sow, a homeless man or woman, its loveliness. That's what's happening there. And when we do this, it's never from pity, is it? It's because we know what it's like to forget our own loveliness. We know how easily it is stripped from us by chance, by meanness, by self-loathing. We do what we do in the name of the Christ because we have felt his hand on our brow. We have been lifted up. What is it then to offer our blessed hand in service except a privilege and a way of saying thank you? We are a people lifted up, friends, whose strength is renewed by our God. And so let's mount up with wings like eagles and feel the lift of thermal grace. And then, sustained by these winds, let us in turn lift up the weary, the worn, that they might remember once more their loveliness and their dignity. May it be so.